Welcome to the REI Hacker Podcast, where we unlock the secrets of real estate success. Join us as we dive into the journeys of top investors, mentors, and industry experts. And now, let's hand it off to our host, Benson Juarez.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here on this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Today's guest is someone who's gone from classroom to the closing table. His name is Cheff. After 20 years as a teacher and a coach, he's the founder of Prima Fund LLC, where he specializes in creative funding. Think things like bridge loans, EMDs, transaction capital, all the stuff that makes deals actually happen. He's also behind Las Vegas Elite Investments. He's flipping homes and diving into land plays in the Rockies with some bold, impact-driven goals. Chris, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on. Good seeing you again. It's been a minute. So
yeah, we've got an interesting history. Yeah, I reached out to you many years ago when we were first launching Privy in the Las Vegas market. And I found you, I don't even know how it was, but I was doing some research and you were making some moves out there, and I reached out to you to see if we could sort of work together. That was part of our strategy of expanding Privy's user base, was to talk to people on the ground that were making big moves. And that was you, and it's still you. What are you working on these days?
That was like, 2015, 16, something
right like around there. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember that. Well, I'm not personally doing flips anymore. Don't really have any desire to do flips myself. I think there's other ways to make money in the space without having to deal with that stress and kind of organizational structure. So, but I do finance, or at least provide secondary financing on flips, depending on, of course, the flipper or the borrower, the operator, whatever you want to call them. As long as they have the experience base to support it, then yeah, I'll work with them. And I mainly to provide gap funding, gap financing, and I'll just call it secondary financing because I really don't like typical gap financing will be put in a second position, and I'll try and avoid second position if I can, mainly due to the security structure and the risk factors that are involved with fix and flip deals. And so I have a little bit more creative way of going about things and trying to provide security, I guess, in those deals. So I'm not doing flipping anymore. I was doing some wholesaling and some lease options at the time, but markets have shifted, times have changed. I was going after foreclosure properties, I think, when we first had met, and because there was a ton of foreclosures happening and a ton of REO properties at the time, still on the aftermath of the crash in 08, 09. And well, unfortunately enough, it's coming back a little bit. So there's a whole slew of foreclosures that are going to be flowing here pretty soon. I mean, a lot of stuff's coming due, so we'll see how that goes. And so mainly I'm concentrating on the transactional funds and the EMDs and the secondary financing and bridge loans, things. I'm basically concentrating on investment opportunities that can happen in a very limited amount of time with a very acceptable return that are secure, of course.
So limited amount of time. You want fast turns in your transactions. You're not looking for long-term plays. You're not investing in, multifamily funds or anything like that. You want quick turns so you can get points.
Preferably, yep, for the most part. That way we have flat rates of return, or at least we're gauging it all on basis points rather than interest rates. So we're not worried about violating any usury laws. I've dealt with several different SEC attorneys, a real estate attorney, PML attorneys, and we're just trying to make sure our docs are compliant, make sure our structure is compliant, and that people are going to be able to get in, get out safely. So the majority of what I'm concentrating on is, it's going to be shorter term. So I'm talking 4 to 6, 6 to 8 months, preferably under a year. However, I am getting ready to release some opportunities where people can get in and be looking at annualized rates, whether it be 10, 11, 12%. But again, in secure situations, and they could be 1 to 5 year situations. But it's going to have to do with different real estate plays, which are going to be kind of comprised around either what I'm planning on doing as far as buying ranches, possibly RV parks put into that mix as well. But then also another facet that I'm working on right now, which is actually exotic car rentals. So,
Okay.
and that'll be something where it's going to be very, very good returns for people. But I plan on using real estate strategies to uh, make the acquisitions happen and basically provide people a solid investment structure, in a great return that's going to be, I don't want to say hard to beat, but they can immediately start um, getting paid out disbursements, in month one, if that's the case. So it'll be interesting. It'll be acceptable for sure. And there's only a handful of niche markets where you can do it, and Vegas is one of those. So
So what do you spend the majority of your time doing? Is it fundraising? Is it identifying deals, underwriting deals? Like where's the biggest pie piece that you're focusing on?
um, I'd say it's raising capital,
Mhm.
um, mainly because the deal flow is always there. I get a lot of deals referred. I have regular borrowers that I work with, and I am pretty picky about the borrowers that I work with as of late, just because of experiences that I've gone through, you know, um, getting started in here, and it's allowed me to be able to better recognize yellow flags, red flags of as far as what to stay away from, types of situations that I'm willing to, present to investors as well. Because the majority of what I do is I'll find the deals, I'll find the opportunities, I'll vet them out, run the numbers, and then if it's something that I feel comfortable with myself investing in, then I'll go out and raise capital. At least I'll present to other investors and see if anybody else wants to get involved. And so that's generally what I'm doing. But yeah, the majority of the time I think is spent raising capital because I always have a slew of deals. However, I'm trying to build more into the team right now as far as for underwriting TC work. I've got a new operator on board. I had one for about 9 months before she pivoted, and then I just recently brought one on a few weeks ago. And we're just trying to hammer out some details right now as far as building different systems and operations because I had a platform that I was utilizing for about 10 months as well, and I've since dumped them because they weren't doing everything that they had promised that they would be able to do, actually from month one. And so I'm trying to do some rebuilding right now, trying to position things a little bit better so I can carve off some of my time and streamline things a little bit more, make things speed up so I can handle the deal flow that I have.
Right. Are you taking, because you're doing some transactional funding, and I mean, EMDs was on the list and that sort of stuff. Do you take each of those opportunities to your investors to kind of underwrite, or have they given you a certain level of flexibility where if you think it's a good deal, they're okay with it?
Um, I mean, that's the thing. I'll do my underwriting, that I see fit, and as far as to make it comfortable for me. However, any capital partner that I get involved in a deal, I highly encourage them to do their own underwriting. I do not want to call the shots for anybody that gets involved in any of my deals. I mean, I am adamant about making sure they are 100% comfortable with the opportunity they're getting themselves into because uh, when you're getting into real estate deals, anything that leaves escrow is going to be definitely a higher risk, of course, right? But regardless, even things that are in escrow can be at risk if you don't have the right paperwork in place or the right communications in place, I should say,
Hmm.
and that meeting between you and the escrow officer to make sure the instructions are clear that that money is going to be protected, um, according to your documents. So, but yeah, so I'm really big as far as making sure everybody's risk tolerance is there before they get involved because if it's not there, I don't want them to invest because private money comes with emotion and if they don't have the risk tolerance and they're not ready to go, they're just not quite in that headspace yet, then yeah, I don't want to bring them into any situation that I'm involved in. So they can
Well, they become
tell them.
part of your job, right? It's just making sure they feel good that day, right? When they're like, "Where's my money? What's going on with my money?" And they're calling you every day and wondering what's going on. And if you take on the wrong partner, you're going to have more sort of like herding cats and making sure everybody feels good about every deal than making money.
Yeah, it adds so much undue stress that I do not need. And I mean, probably out of about 300 investors that I've had into deals, I've had maybe 5 that had just been such complete pain, but just because the entitlement is, I don't want to say beyond belief, but it's just amazing that some people feel like they're the only ones that need to be taken care of, and they're the only ones that matter, and those are in my world, they're, those are takers, and I'm looking for people that are givers, or people that are basically team players, somebody who's going to be able to attribute to the deal in a positive sense. Whereas if something does happen throughout the course of a deal, we are defined as active investments, utilizing JV agreements and whatnot. And so they are JV partners. And some people just don't understand that it's like, listen, you're a partner in the deal. So if we run into a situation where we need to convene and try and help find a solution, that's part of your role. And there's, like I said, only been a handful that have gotten into situations, as far as into certain deals, that they didn't vet anything. They didn't vet the deal. They didn't vet the borrower. They didn't even read the dang docs, and they're just signing stuff and sending money, and expecting everything to go according to plan.
Right.
And those are the type of people that I watch out for now, because if they're going to be too lazy to even read the documents, let alone vet the deal or something, I'm not going to have them depend on everything about the deal that it's just going to go smooth and according to plan. I mean, the word investment is synonymous with risk. You're putting that's why there's a significant return, because the risk is higher risk, higher reward. You take a lot of that risk down. Yeah, of course your reward's going to go down. But that's why, as far as the secondary financing is very risky. So I go into deals myself, realizing that when I put money down on a deal, especially when it comes to a secondary financing or a gap, that there's a chance of losing your money. Is it preferable? Of course not. But there's a reason why people make significant amounts of money. Why do you think high rollers, when they're gambling, they make a huge payout when everything comes together?
Mm-hmm.
But their risk is definitely a hell of a lot higher, because they could lose everything in one shot. We're trying to reduce that risk as much as possible with our security structures to make sure people are going to get paid out. Can you ever guarantee it? Not when it leaves escrow. You can never guarantee it. You're always dependent on the person who's borrowing the money and their team, and that's where you're putting most of your faith. So yeah, it's a risky situation, but can the payout be wonderful and you can definitely see great reward? Absolutely. But it's just a matter of trying to position things where you're not going to put yourself, you're going to try and eliminate as much risk as you possibly can. That's all.
Yeah.
So,
And
but yeah, I want to reduce the stress, because it's amazing how much just a few people can add so much stress into your life just from being, well, highly entitled, I guess.
well, that's the reason why you probably stopped doing so many flips, right? Because that was the stressful situation. And shifting over to the finance side of the business, if you do things right, you can certainly level the amount of stress, the amount of money and time you have to spend on each deal. But that's when the underwriting becomes so important, right? And finding the right deals, and also underwriting your partners, like you were just talking about, like making sure you are being upfront and not selling deals to people, but just presenting the deal, presenting the opportunity, and letting them make the decision whether or not it makes sense, and not having to like force them into a deal. Because anytime you have to sell or force somebody, those are the ones that are going to come back and cause problems down the road.
Very much so. Yeah, I don't try and sell anybody on a deal. It's like if they're not 100% comfortable with the deal, I don't want to be involved. I mean, I'll read their face, I'll read their mannerisms, and if they're him-hawing about things and they seem like they're not quite there, I'll encourage them. Maybe you're not ready. Please don't do this. Try and get your feet wet doing something else that's gonna make you feel a little bit better than this is. And then come back when you're ready, because I don't want to deal with the emotion. That takes a lot of the fun out of it, and I want to be able to go in and I wish I could guarantee everything, but you can't. You just straight up can't. So that's why now I utilize hold harmless agreements that basically clearly define my roles and responsibilities, their roles and responsibilities, and what's involved in the deal. Because in this space, of course, you get a lot of people that are new and don't realize what they're getting into before it's too late. And because some people just they hear about the great returns and deals, and they jump in head first into situations that they probably shouldn't be in. And they need to be educated as much as possible. And you see that happening all the time. You hear about people getting in bad deals. It's because they get into things that they had no business being in, because first of all, they didn't even necessarily know what the heck they were getting into, let alone even knew what they were reading, as far as documentation or how to vet a deal or how to, properly, just assess their risk. So I try and educate as much as I possibly can now. So I'll try and hold office hours. I'll try and get into different Zooms where there's newer investors in there and try and answer questions where I can, but just basically trying to help people avoid any of those pitfalls that I ever had earlier on. Because if somebody else has gone through the pain points from being in the trenches, there's no need for anybody else to have to go through it. If we can help them avoid it, and that's been a primary goal right now, is trying to help newer investors avoid bad situations. So.
Yeah. So are you providing some like low level education on helping these newer investors understand what it really means to put money into a fund where they're a limited partner, they don't have a lot of control, they're really depending on the general partners to underwrite and manage the deal? How is that process for you?
I mean, there's nothing like a formal education, but I do make myself as available as possible. It's really hard because I'm just wicked busy and I'm always having a heck of a time trying to keep up with, when it comes between all your emails, texts, Facebook messages, Instagram stuff, just where you're getting inundated. And I'm sure you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is just very challenging to keep up with that, but then still to try and carve out time to help people where you can. And that's a lot of the reason why I do offer the office hours. So that way, at least I have a designated time where people can come, during the week and try and ask questions where they can, but also actively trying to get into some of these, like I was saying, these other Zoom meetings where there's newer investors, so I can try and add my 2 cents where need be to try and keep people, a little safer. And we're in different investment groups and different investment, whatever, Facebook groups, community or networking groups, stuff like that, where I'll always, if I ever recognize something, I'm going to chime in and be like, hey, you might want to do this, do that, or watch out for this or that.
Yeah.
So yeah, no formal education, but just trying to help where I can. That's all.
How are you finding new investors right now? Right? You said there's enough deals out there. It seems to be there's enough deals. Not all of them are good, but when you're fundraising, what's your funnel look like? Is it networking events? Are you, do you have a website where people can go and fill out a form and get in contact with you? How are you attracting investors?
We have a couple different landing pages. I don't necessarily have a formal website right now. That's being worked on, because I just haven't had to have one yet. But now I'm needing one more for informational purposes more than anything, just so people know who I am, and what I do, just so they have a name with a face and have a clear understanding of what my experience, has been like. But we do have a landing page where people can go and see different deals, or even we'll have a landing page per deal, if you will, where they can get themselves involved, and fill out a form and express their interest. And the other way is like you were asking, as far as how am I finding these people? I get a lot of people that come to me, but then I try and go to as many networking events as I can, and I'll just try and spread the word with what I'm doing and let that kind of speak for itself. And then when people get a little more, intently involved, I guess, or intently curious about, what the situation is, then that's where we'll have our Zoom meetings and I'll explain the whole security process and we'll go through deals in depth if we need to. But I'm trying to, kind of in the process of trying to streamline a lot of that so I can try and eliminate a lot of that time that is spent doing those individual meetings. And that way if I can provide more information through a recorded video, let them cover a certain amount of information that I can provide them. And then when they have questions, then we can form a Zoom or put a Zoom together and get those answered. And that's the thing. Even with my borrowers, though, whenever I'm bringing my borrowers into play, that's one thing I do push across to them. It's like, listen, if people do have questions or they do want to meet you, virtually, of course, but if they do want to have a chat with you, then I need to make sure they're going to be available to have those Zoom meetings, so we can try and build in as much comfort and trust into the process as possible. Because I personally approach this how I would want to, what I would expect for myself if somebody was going to present a deal to me, because I want to have that comfort level. I want to know what I'm getting myself into. And so that's why I think it's really important for people to have an opportunity to chat with the borrower face to face, if you will, if need be. And that just builds that comfort into the deal and tries to eliminate some of that emotion that can come along with it.
That's interesting. I haven't thought about it, and I haven't heard anybody talk about it before. But instead of you being, the main person, what you are, but you're actually introducing the lenders to the people who are actually getting the money, so they can get comfortable with with the way they operate and the way they are.
Right. Because people might have certain little questions, and this has happened before. They're like, "Oh, I don't know who this guy is," and blah blah blah. But then it took one meeting, one Zoom meeting for them to get to meet them, talk to them about their situation, get an idea of what their motivation is like, and that sometimes is, will make or break a deal. So I would rather present as much information as possible for that person to make a very educated decision on if they're gonna, if they want to get involved in the deal or not. So not only do I, well, first of all, with the borrowers, I'll interview every borrower that I have, and I'll record it. I'll have them tell me about themselves a little bit, and then tell me about the deal. Why should we invest with you on this deal? Sell us the concept, and I'll record that, and I'll make that available for people as well, so they can see exactly, coming out of the horse's mouth, I guess, if you will, why we should invest with this guy or this gal. But then, even after we close, as far as once we get to close of escrow, I'll take those capital partners and that borrower. We'll have one quick Zoom meeting. So basically we're on the same page, and now we're ready to start the project. It's like, okay, here are the expectations, of everybody. Here's what we expect out of you, Mr. Borrower. So don't let us down, take the sucker to the finish line. We're your biggest cheerleaders. We're here when you need us. And so everybody's on the same page, and then we have a good, clean start. But I will also, like I just did this yesterday, for another project, I'll get on a Zoom with the contractor. I'm going to get on the Zoom with the contractor. We're going to go over the scopes of work. We're going to go over the budget with the scope of work. I want to see his references, as far as I want to see pictures from his portfolio. I want to see what his finished work looks like, from basically what you start with and what you end up with, and then I want you to show me several occurrences, because I want to know you're going to be able to get this thing done. We are depending on you. And I'm talking, of course, only fix and flip projects. But regardless, I need to talk to the key components that are going to make this deal happen. So I'll do that with a contractor, and then I'll talk to their dispo agent. And so if they have a dispo agent on board, I want to talk to them. I want to know what they've done in the past. I want to know what the market is like in their opinion. But then I'm also going to be calling other brokers in the area that have been there for a long time, 10, 15 years preferably, at least. But then I want to talk to them about the market. I want to find out what the numbers are looking like, where they think the market's going to be at by the time that project's done. What are we up against when it comes to exiting this project? So, I mean, I'm covering multiple points when it comes to trying to figure out if this deal is going to happen or not, or if it's going to be a viable investment, if you will.
Yeah, that is so much due diligence. I haven't heard of many people that are doing that much, because they build a certain amount of a buffer into the deal itself with the numbers, right? Like,
right.
70% of after repair value, or whatever the numbers are, or LTV. But you're going above and beyond, honestly. Like, I just haven't heard of many people talking to the agent and then other brokers in the market on how that agent acts. So, I mean, your lenders, or the investors in your fund, do they know that they're getting that much from you? Or, because they're certainly not going to get it with other funds.
It's a good question. I don't necessarily share. Well, I don't know.
I think it's worth
Sometimes
mentioning, honestly. Like, when you're raising cash, like, I would, all those due diligence points you just talked about, that checklist of due diligence, is more than most people are doing, hands down.
Yeah, it is. But I just know how it is when you get into a deal and it comes time to exit, and maybe the value's not there, or maybe the market softened up, or whatever thing might come up. I want to make sure I can try and eliminate any potential issues that might come up, because if I feel like we're going to run into a problem when it comes time to exit, I might not want to get into that deal, And plus, if it's a softer market, It's like, okay, well, what if you can't exit? What's your plan B?
Right.
What's your plan C? You know, so we got to try and figure out a definite way to get people out of the deal, preferably on time, but anybody that gets into fix and flip deals, they probably realize that probably about 85% of the deals don't necessarily go according to
Yeah.
plan. And you just hope for the best and you hope everything's going to get finished on time. And that's something else that I do with my underwriting is I will ask them if they've recently spoke to the permitting office. How backed up is the permitting office? Are they on time? And there's reasons why I don't do any more. I won't provide financing for any fix and flip deals anyway. When it comes to Philadelphia, Fulton County in Atlanta, Mesa, Arizona. I mean, Philadelphia is backed up minimum 3 months. Fulton County is backed up on permitting 3 to 4 months. Mesa is backed up 6 months right now. And so that's one other step that I will take in these areas. I'm going to call the permitting office. Where are you guys at on your timeline?
Mm-hmm.
Because if these permits get held up, that's going to drag us into deep water. Right now, and that's why, like I said, I'm done with Philadelphia. We're in a deal right now over there that the permitting office has held up the deal so much that we've actually expired the term of the hard money lender, which was 12 months, and now since that term expired, they put that loan into default, and now they froze the draws.
Wow.
And the whole problem has been trying to get the dang permit from the city. They've been that backed up, but it's not even only being backed up. Atlanta's doing this too. They're just as guilty on this too. Every inspection they have, they're sending somebody different. And so we just had recently a problem where one guy went out there and he's like, "Oh yeah, you guys got to get an engineer on this. You got to do this and that and the other thing." So they do that after it took forever to get the permit. It took like 3 months to get the permit. They finally got this done, had to get the engineer, get all this crap done. Then the next guy comes out to issue a different permit. He's like, "Why'd you guys do all this stuff? You didn't need to do that." It's like, oh my gosh, you guys are killing us. You guys need to get on the same page here. And again, it's a situation where it's just drug us out. So that's no fun. And I need to make sure that it's going to be a situation where they're going to be able to get their permits in a reasonable amount of time, get us the heck out of the deal, sooner than later, preferably closer to the, anticipated exit
Right.
time. So
Yeah.
there's a lot.
Those delays. I mean, delays suck, right? And you can't turn your money as quick, but as long as they're making their interest payment every month, like it's not as bad. But when you have a default on the first mortgage or the first lien, the hard money loan, that can screw everything up. And, who knows what's going to happen with that particular deal, but that's a mess.
Well, and the thing is, we don't do interest payments, right? Because we're not dealing with percentages. We're dealing with points. We're dealing with points on the back end. So everything's getting deferred to the exit. And so they're paying interest payments on the hard money, but the only way that I can have a better return is dealing with a flat fee. And so we do have to have a flat fee on the back end, and we're getting paid out of the equity on the exit. And so hence you do have a higher risk, but you do have a higher reward. But that's a lot of the reason why I position the security that I do as well, because we do a limited membership in the LLC structure, which does provide a lot of leverage, if you will, if need be. So basically, if things are starting to fall apart a little bit with the borrower, then if we have to have a vote initiated due to a breach in the contract, then we will. And we don't ever want to take over a project or vote any borrower out of their managerial position in the LLC. But if it comes down to things going crazy and we have to protect our money, then that's an action that we might have to take. And not only that, but I've also put that structure together for a reason, because we did have an instance with a St. Louis borrower where we were in deals in first position, and who knew, the guy had a lot of experience, but he comes down with ALS,
Man.
and so he got his crazy ex-wife, who was his CFO at the time on the deal, pretty much threw him in an assisted living facility where nobody could find him, blocked all communication, pretty much waiting for him to die, and then the deal fell apart. He had a point of failure, unfortunately, that was unforeseen with his project management and with his contractor, because it wasn't strong enough as far as that loyalty. So that fell apart when he was out of the picture. and then the work wasn't getting done. It drug us out, and we were having such a hard time with communication because it was being blocked, and because of his limited physical ability, because he lost the ability to talk, lost the ability to use his arm and his other hand. So now he's at the point right now, last time I heard anyway, of basically it's a situation, and it happens with ALS patients, I guess, where they have to, there's a computer where they put a series of words up on a tablet or whatever, and the computer reads where your eyes are going to, so that's how you communicate. And that's, yeah, so that's pretty rough.
I mean, no amount of underwriting is going to find a situation like that. Like, what's next? Are you going to add in a blood test to in the underwriting process
Well,
and get back a clean bill of health?
the point behind that is, what do you do if you get into a deal with a borrower? What if he dies next week?
Yeah.
Now what? He gets bounced off a bus, and then you're sitting in a deal where you're like, holy cow, who's going to get this done? Especially if you're in second lien, right? Because if you're in a lien position, you're like, oh, well, what are our options? Foreclosure. That's about it. That's all you can do, unless the value is already in the deal. But now with the security structure that I put together, we actually have the ability to do something about it, to protect the money, because like I said, we don't want to have to take over a project. But if something like that happens, now we have a better way of protecting our money, and trying to make sure we can find success rather than, hanging out praying for the best.
So this security
It's a
structure
lot
is,
better.
is different than most funds, most lending scenarios where they're following a deed of trust against the property. There's a promissory note.
Right.
Maybe they'll get a personal guarantee, get interest payments. That's kind of a standard type deal with the lending situation, but you've created something new.
Yeah. I mean, we still make them sign and notarize a personal promissory note. So now we're doing a personal promissory note rather than against the LLC. So that way it follows them around. And we do a personal guarantee. Personal guarantees aren't that strong, but because they're as strong as the guy's bank account,
Hmm.
right? But we do try and we build that in. We build the personal promissory note in. I mean, if there is something to cross collateralize, depending on the equity position of the potential flip property, we will cross collateralize, and we'll get liens on something else as well. Every scenario is different, but there's a reason why we do build a lot of this stuff in, just because we're trying to really hold them to the fire, that you need to get this done and make sure people are getting made whole by the time you exit, or at least make sure you're going to exit. So
Is that part of
yeah, it's
your
different.
strategy to attract new investors and raise capital, is to talk about this unique, I don't know, structure that you've built that's different than what other funds are doing?
It does help. It does help. A lot of people that invest, at least that I'm seeing anyway, a lot of people that do invest in secondary financing, most of them are going into a second lien position. I think, and I guess this is a personal feeling, but I kind of feel that some of them are being undereducated when it comes to a lien position. They're like, oh, well, yeah, you're in second lien, you're in a strong position. Okay, you need to understand, when you're in a second lien position, that means you get paid second. You get paid, after the first lien. So you got to make sure that value is going to be in there. You got to make sure everything is going to go according to plan, where there's still going to be enough meat on the bones for you to get paid. And you have to make sure, uh, according to their loan agreement with the first, and according to your security structure that you have with the borrower, it's like, are you going to make sure that you get paid out, when it happens? Because we've seen markets soften and people knock down prices, and then who's the first one that's going to have their money cut into? The second,
Yeah.
because you got to make sure that first is made whole, and otherwise the first is going to foreclose. But if the first forecloses, now they might have to fire sell the property, and they might be willing to take less. We're not. We don't want to take less. We want to capitalize as much as we can out of that deal according to what we signed up for. And so that's why, again, those are reasons why I try and implement this security structure, because if we see things going a direction that isn't preferable, now we have at least the ability to have a meeting, talk about it, and as I said, I'm trying to look for team players, that come in. They're actually going to be actual JV partners, joint venture partners, that we can actually come together and try and find a solution. However, if we can't find a solution due to, potential actions of the borrower that might have not been the best actions, then if we have to take over, we're going to take over and try and make sure we can, exit this sucker. But it's not even security for us. It's security for us. It's security for the first lien holder. It's security for the borrower, because now we might be helping this guy keep, stay out of a default, stay out of a foreclosure, stay out of a bad situation. Maybe help save his credit. He might have taken a huge credit hit if he didn't have, these partners in his deal. So there's benefits for the borrower as well. It's not all about the JV partners. We have a collective effort and focus, and that's getting that thing finished and exited. And so that's the main goal. I've only had pushback from a couple of borrowers on this situation, where they're like, "Oh, I don't want somebody coming in trying to take over my business, and telling me what kind of, what kind of finishes I need to be putting on this project." It's like, dude, if we wanted to do a project, we would have done our own. We're in here to root you on. We're in here trusting your skill set and trusting your experience to get this thing done. And so that's our main thing. And the way I do talk to the borrowers about it, and once I give them all those points that I've mentioned here, plus a few more, it does instill some comfort in them as far as realizing where we're at, and that it's like, hey, dude, listen, we're on the same team. We want to help you find success, because if we all find success together, let's do it again. Let's do it again. We're all in real estate investing to try and make some money. So we got to help each other out. Some people come into the into the secondary financing. Sometimes they'll come in looking at the borrower as like, dude, you better do your thing. You better do the right thing, and kind of looking at him more of a little bit of an adversary. Where they need to understand, it's like, listen, he's in the same space you are. You're all in here to make money. You're just doing it a different way. He wants to do projects. You don't. You want to be a little more passive about it. Granted, you're in an active investment, but you're not having to sit there and manage GCs or subcontractors or anything like that. But at the same time, we want to help him find success. He finds success, you find success, we all win. Let's do it again. That's why we're in this. So,
oh yeah, that repeat business is the best, because you've already done your due diligence on the borrower. And some of my favorite borrowers that I lend to on my PML deals are the ones that it's repeat business. And I've even done deals where I don't even take the money back. We just redeploy that cash directly from the title company. It just keeps it nice and simple, and we just create new docs, and that money it stays on their side of the balance sheet over there. And we still do the points and all that sort of stuff. But now that they've proven themselves, it's just rinse and repeat. And that really streamlines the process too, because now you don't have to underwrite the person and the deal each time. You can just underwrite the deal, and the person handles their own business.
Right.
So you mentioned networking earlier as a way for you to get people into your funnel, and you're part of three pretty important groups. You're part of Gator, you're part of Sub 2, and you're part of Owners Club. Now, with that networking, are you finding that those groups of people are ending up being borrowers or lenders or both?
A little bit of both. Not. I mean, I guess I don't push the service of lending onto them too much. I guess there's people that have a little bit different mindset, or possibly even better resources to find cheaper money, right? And if they can, great. That's awesome. I just want people to have wins. I do work with people mainly that are looking to scale. That's my main target right now. I used to work with folks that had less experience than currently preferable. And so learning through those, as far as being in the trenches and learning from those experiences, I don't necessarily work with newbies anymore, or newer folks, even if they've had, 2, 3, 4 deals. It's going to be a matter of, how did those deals go? I want to talk to your references. I want to talk to anybody that's invested in your deal. I want to talk to your contractor. I want to know what, how that deal went before I even make a decision if I'm going to be doing business with you. Otherwise, my ideal client is somebody that has been through those times. They consistently are doing this as a full-time job. They're doing 3, 4, 5, 10 deals a year, but now they want to scale their business, but they need that liquid capital to scale. And so those are the people that I'd preferably work with, mainly because they've got their systems down, they've got their people in place, they've got their teams built, and now they're just looking to build that from the point they've that they've been going off of that whole time. So if I can provide them that extra capital leverage and help them grow, then that's mainly what I'm about. And they understand it more. They're a little less, adverse to dealing with the cost of money when it comes to that. They understand that they need to just find a better deal, buy at a better price to be able to create that margin that's needed for that cost of money. And
So
it hasn't been too much of an issue. I'm just picky about who I borrow to now.
yeah,
That's all.
and there were some deals that went sideways, right? Probably some tough lessons, some expensive lessons with some newer
Yeah.
borrowers who, put on a good face and put their best foot forward. They played the part. We can get this done. Maybe it was even people you knew, right? So you had a personal relationship with
Yeah.
them. What were some of like the biggest lessons you learned? And can you talk about maybe a deal that really solidified the lesson that you learned?
Yeah, none of them were really, personal acquaintances or anything like that. So, I mean, because I was working with certain private or certain hard money brokers, if you will, that were bringing deals, and we were trying to do some things together. And that taught me a strong lesson about hard money brokers. You just Some of them have uh, good habits, I guess, as far as working practices, and some are less favorable as far as their practices that they might implement. And people have to be very cautious about that as well, because it's not always about the borrower and about your capital partner that you're bringing in. You need to understand who you might be dealing with, who's providing, uh, the primary loan, if you will, on the property. I'm not as concerned about it when I deal directly with the actual lender, but when it comes to a broker, you just have to make sure you do your due diligence when it comes to that as well, and understand what kind of business they do, or what their focus might be.
Hmm.
Because I definitely have had ones that their main concern is their bottom line, and that's it, you know. And they will make a deal. They'll make something into a deal that should not be a deal,
Right.
and that's been a hard lesson learned too, because we've had some really poor situations with um, actually a specific hard money broker, and it's been unfortunate that it took us so long to learn that some of the practices were not that desirable. And but it's unfortunately too late at that point, and you're already stuck in a situation that you'd prefer not to be in. So the deals that well, and this boils back down to experience level, because when you work with a borrower that runs into a situation that they've maybe never seen before, or they might not have enough liquid resources to pull themselves out of. They may have made a bad choice on how they spent their draw money. Maybe they wasted it instead of being a little more efficient with it in their scope of work. We've had that before. But the biggest problem that is very consistent across the board with all of them is when, as far as the inexperienced ones, the less experience they have, the more they're going to put their head in the sand if they run into an issue they can't handle.
Hmm.
And they will put their head in the sand. They will ignore calls. They will turn into little ghosts. And understandably, to a certain point, they're scared. They're scared. They know they're in a pickle. They are, maybe they're trying to salvage it. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're just like, oh my gosh, this is too much. I can't handle it. I'm going to walk away. We've actually had one situation like that. The guy just disappeared. I mean, straight up disappeared. Left the house. There was still draw money available. There was still money coming in, and he was gone. Nobody could find him.
Wow.
And so we had no choice but to foreclose, and it sucked. It's like, who would have guessed? You can't gauge that. But there again, that's where I'll keep on saying that it just all boils down to who you're dealing with, what kind of experience they have. Uh, but yeah, we've had some interesting situations, and just like the city situations, those suck,
Hmm.
because you're limited on what you can do, according to what the city's you know load capacity is, as far as what they can handle for workload, and you can't do anything. I mean, if you complain to them, they could be turds and just delay even more. Well, I'll show him.
Right.
So it's a fine line right there. That's where if you're dealing with a municipality that's backed up on on permits, you better know a guy. You better have an inside connection where you can get some favors and try and make sure you get your permitting on time without them being, more problematic than not, I guess. But yeah, as far as narrowing something down, as far as the worst case scenario, it was that ALS, that guy that got
Yeah,
ALS,
sounds like it. And
because
even
we
that
had to
guy had the
foreclose.
best intentions, right? Like most people who start this and they're borrowing money, they think they've got a good deal. They think they can execute. Have you ever had somebody where it was just full on fraud? Like they had ill intentions from the very beginning and they pulled the wool over your eyes.
Um, there was a situation where it could have been somebody could have interpreted it as such, but what I felt like it was, gosh, you know what? I guess you kind of could say it was fraud because they basically released our money and it wasn't supposed to be released. It was an EMD
Mm.
situation. So we had 50,000 on an EMD, and actually with the fees on top, it ended up being like 54,200, and I'd brought 29.2 of my own money, and somebody else had brought 25, and they knew very well and clear that if the financing wasn't approved, that money was not to leave escrow. And again, this boils down to the TC work that was done, because apparently the escrow instructions weren't clear enough. They weren't clearly understood enough, and they didn't necessarily have the documentation to back that up as far as being reiterated from the escrow officer to them in an email that reflecting that they clearly understood, what the how the deal was supposed to go. So the financing was so close. Oh, it's definitely going to go through. And so I'll just go ahead and release the money and I won't tell them because it's going through. And then it didn't go through.
Mm.
And our money was already released.
So who was the money
And
released to?
so the seller.
Mm.
So the EMD was released to the seller. And so they captured the 50 grand, and some change. And yeah, we are still trying to go after this gal. So it's been very challenging. Uh, because if you could call that fraudulent, because she breached the contract at that point. She breached the instructions, but yeah, so that was a no good situation, and it sucks to lose a lot of money, and that's the second time I've lost money in an EMD situation, and unfortunately it was because of a lack of proper paperwork with the TC.
Mm.
So that's where people have to really be careful. They have to eh, they have to not only get their documentation but have it reviewed if need be by someone to make sure it's going to have the strength to protect their money. So you got to do your due diligence every deal.
Yeah, lots of lessons learned in transactions, but that's one thing I learned about this business is that, I've been in the business for over 20 years and every deal I do, there's always something new that rears its ugly head, something you haven't seen before. You can be best prepared. You can have the best documentation. You can have all the experience in the world. And it just seems like there's always something that pops up that you haven't experienced before. But that's where I think that your past experiences help so much because then you figure out how to solve problems, right? And you're not being stressed out. You're not freaking out. You're not, biting people's heads off. There's a way to handle situations, even if you don't know the solution, just because you know how to handle solutions from your past, right?
Right, right. Yeah, it's tricky out there. So just take them as they come. But like you say, every deal is unique, and you just have to vet it and balance it and try and get through the best you can. And hopefully you're making the right choice. Hence the
Yeah.
risk.
Well, Chris, you certainly have a unique business model. You've got this security instrument that is unique that I haven't heard about before. And you guys are doing way more due diligence than the average fund manager that I've talked to. So congratulations on that. For people who are listening here who are either thinking about borrowing cash for their next deal or maybe an investor who is looking at parking some money someplace where they can get some good returns backed by real estate, where can they find you? Where can they connect with you and talk with you?
Well, I generally have a link to my Blink card, but I don't know how we'd do that. Otherwise, primafund.com is my domain,
Okay.
but it's just a matter of having a place to land right now. So I got to find out where my operator's at currently on my landing page for that.
Okay.
So,
Well, how about this?
but
We'll
it should
get a
direct.
link from you and we'll put it in the show notes so that people can actually go directly to your Blink card and get your contact information, reach out. Are you doing anything on social media? Any platforms where you're putting content?
Yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, all the above. And the majority, if they search either Chris.Cheff or just Chris Cheff altogether, one word, they'll find me on any of those platforms.
Awesome. Well, that sounds good, Chris. Well, thanks again for taking the time. Thanks for sharing some nuggets and sharing some experiences with the audience. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me on, man. It's always good to reconnect with you. So just looking forward to hanging out again if we ever run into each other.
Oh, I'm sure we will. And everybody, thank you for listening to this edition of the REI Hacker Podcast. Keep an eye out for more amazing guests like Chris Cheff. We talk about real estate investing, entrepreneurship, and business. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care.
Appreciate you.